When a distraught little girl bursts into her neighbor's house late at night, clutching a faded photo of her missing mom, it seems like a heartbreaking plea for help. But as her search unfolds, a chilling truth about her mother emerges. One that no one saw coming. Before we dive into this emotional and suspenseful story, let us know where you're watching from, and if you believe in the power of never giving up, don't forget to like and subscribe for more gripping tales. And if you believe in speaking out for the truth, don't forget to like and subscribe for more. Scarlett's pencil hovered over the lined page of her notebook as the classroom door creaked open. Every head swiveled in unison, and Mr. O'Malley, the guidance counselor, stepped in with a solemn expression. Scarlett's stomach twisted. This almost never happened unless there was serious news. "Scarlett," Mr. O'Malley said, his voice measured but tight, "could you come with me for a moment?" A hush fell across the class. A couple of curious glances darted in Scarlett's direction, and she tried her best to ignore the prickle of unease creeping up her spine. She slipped her notebook into her backpack, each footstep to the door a little heavier than the last. What could this be about? She couldn't recall doing anything that would prompt a surprise visit from the guidance counselor. Mr. O'Malley didn't say much as they walked down the corridor, his shoes tapping in firm, deliberate beats. Scarlett swallowed, her palms clammy around the straps of her bag. They halted outside the small counseling office, where the frosted glass pane gave only a vague silhouette of people inside. When Mr. O'Malley pushed the door open, Scarlett noticed the two figures sitting in the chairs. Her new stepfather, Trevor Lewis, had his hands folded carefully in his lap, face drawn in worry. Next to him, Detective Walsh, the officer assigned to her mother's missing person case, offered Scarlett a tense nod. But it was the presence of the detective that sent Scarlett's heart slamming against her ribcage. "Come in," Mr. O'Malley said kindly, motioning toward the free seat. Reluctantly, Scarlett inched forward and sat. The air in the room felt stale and suffocating. She hadn't expected to see Trevor and Detective Walsh together, not like this. Detective Walsh cleared his throat. "Scarlett, I'm sure you know we've been searching for your mother, Isabel Lewis, for over a month." Scarlett nodded, her throat too tight to speak. She couldn't recall the last time she'd had a good night's sleep. Every passing day without her mom at home weighed on her, pressing down more than any homework assignment or school worry ever could. Trevor, tall and broad-shouldered, turned toward her with a practiced look of concern. "Sweetheart, Detective Walsh has some updates about the search. They've decided to scale things back." The detective's eyes flicked downward. "It's true, Scarlett. We've hit a wall. The official search is suspended unless new evidence surfaces." Her gut twisted violently. She had feared this exact moment. Her mother had been gone too long, but Scarlett refused to accept that there was no hope. Her voice emerged small, wavering. "You're giving up?" Detective Walsh winced. "We'll still follow any solid tips that come in, but resources are limited." "I'm sorry." Mr. O'Malley placed a reassuring hand on Scarlett's shoulder. "Scarlett, if you need support, the school is here for you. We know how difficult this situation must be." Her gaze slid to Trevor, whose expression seemed carefully cast in sympathy. "I'll do everything I can to help," he said, voice smooth. "We just have to accept what the police have decided for now." But Scarlett's heart recoiled at his words. She couldn't explain why, but a shiver of distrust ran through her every time Trevor spoke about her mother. Something about his tone never felt authentic. That day in the guidance office, she forced herself to nod. I understand." But inside, a seed of resolve took root. If the police weren't going to find her mother, maybe she had to search on her own. That evening, the ride home was somber. Trevor drove in silence, the car gliding over smooth suburban streets. Scarlett stared out the window, recalling how her mom's laughter had once filled this very car. Isabel's bright smile, her spontaneous jokes, her unstoppable spirit, gone like a wisp of smoke. The thought made Scarlett's chest ache. When they parked, Trevor offered a tight smile. "Are you hungry? I can heat something up." Scarlett shook her head, slipping out of the car before he could insist. The house felt unnaturally quiet. A month ago, the rooms would have brimmed with warmth, her mother humming in the kitchen, plants thriving by the sunlight streaming through each window. Now, the living room looked almost staged, too clean and orderly. Boxes of her mother's belongings were stacked in the corner, as though Trevor had tried to tidy them away from daily view. Scarlett trudged upstairs to her bedroom, the one place that still felt like her own. She dropped onto her bed and gazed at a photo on her nightstand, her mother hugging her at the beach last summer, both with sand on their feet and sunburn on their noses. Her mother's wave of chestnut-brown hair, her broad grin, it felt like it had happened an entire lifetime ago. She could still hear Trevor moving around downstairs. She squeezed her eyes shut, pondering the detective's words, "We've hit a wall." But Scarlett couldn't accept that. She had this unshakable belief that her mother was still alive. She wasn't sure why she felt so certain, only that she did. The next day at school, Scarlett trudged through classes, distracted by worry. At lunch, she slipped away from the buzzing cafeteria to a quiet corner in the back courtyard. She needed space to think. Everything around her felt loud, jarring, and out of sync with the reality inside her head. Suddenly, she heard a voice call her name. She turned to see Miss Farrow, her English teacher, approaching. Miss Farrow was warm and perceptive, known for noticing when her students were hurting. "Mind if I join you?" she asked gently. Scarlett shrugged. "I guess so." Miss Farrow sat down on the bench, setting her mug of tea beside her. "I've been worried about you. I heard about the search. Your stepfather updated the school staff. Are you coping okay?" Scarlett's shoulders stiffened. She pressed her lips together, hesitant. For a moment, she considered telling Miss Farrow about the policeman's decision to suspend the active search, about how Trevor's behavior felt off, but the words got tangled on her tongue. She finally settled on, "I'm all right." Miss Farrow didn't push. "If that changes, let me know. Sometimes, burdens are easier to carry with a little help." Scarlett nodded, not quite trusting her voice. She appreciated Miss Farrow's concern, but some part of her was convinced that talking to an adult might just get back to Trevor. He'd seemed so attentive, so supportive, yet her instincts told her something was amiss. And if she confided in a teacher, she wasn't sure how Trevor would react. Days passed, and Scarlett steeled herself for a lonely search. She devoured old detective novels from the library, scanned local news articles for any clue about missing person cases, and pored over her mother's planner at home. Isabel had always scribbled small notes to remind herself of appointments or errands, and Scarlett hoped one of those might lead somewhere new. One crisp afternoon, when Trevor left for an errand, Scarlett took the chance to rifle through her mother's office. The room felt frozen in time. A calendar still turned to the month Isabel disappeared, a half-written grocery list on the desk. Scarlett's heart clenched at the sight. But if a hint remained of where Isabel might have gone, it had to be here. After searching the drawers, Scarlett eventually found a small, locked journal with her mother's initials scrawled on the cover. Adrenaline spiked. Maybe inside lay the clues to her mother's last steps. But she couldn't open it. She needed a key or a combination. She fiddled with it in frustration, eventually tucking it under a loose floorboard she'd discovered as a hiding spot. The last thing she wanted was for Trevor to see her snooping. That evening, Trevor cornered her as she finished homework. "Scarlett, I noticed you were in your mother's office earlier," he said, voice calm but clipped. "You know you can ask me if you need anything. I've told you I'm here to help find her." Scarlett's heart slammed in her chest. "I was just missing her, looking at some old pictures. Nothing more." His gaze flicked over her face, as though searching for signs of deception. Then his shoulders relaxed, and a smile slid onto his face. "I understand. We both want her home, right?" She managed a nod, swallowing the lump in her throat. "Is that really what you want?" She thought but dared not ask. Still, Trevor's eyes lingered too long, and as he turned away, Scarlett sensed a shift in his demeanor, like a mask smoothing over his features. She exhaled slowly, hugging herself, convinced more than ever that Trevor was hiding something. As the weeks dragged on, Miss Farrow's concern for Scarlett deepened. The little glimpses of sadness she'd noticed were now full-blown signs of distress. Scarlett arrived at class looking drained, her hair tied haphazardly, her expressions dull. One morning, Miss Farrow gently asked Scarlett to stay behind after the bell rang. "How are you truly?" she asked, resting her elbows on the desk and meeting Scarlett's eyes. You're pale, you look exhausted. Are you eating well, sleeping enough? Scarlett toyed with the end of her braid. It's just, everything feels heavy at home. Not having my mom. I can't sleep well. Ms. Farrow nodded sympathetically. Any update on the investigation? Scarlett shook her head, tears pricking. Detective Walsh says there's nothing new. They're not searching. Trevor claims he's still making phone calls, but I don't feel reassured. Ms. Farrow's forehead creased. If you ever need someone to talk to, or if something at home doesn't seem right, you can confide in me. I'm here to help, not judge. Scarlett managed a slight smile. Thank you. I'll keep that in mind. That afternoon, the tension at home felt worse than ever. Trevor had taken to hovering around Scarlett's every move, checking her phone usage, prodding her with questions about school. She wasn't sure if he suspected her of investigating or if he just liked controlling the narrative. Scarlett resolved to take a bigger risk. She needed concrete clues, something to prove she was right about Trevor. The feeling that he knew more about her mother's disappearance refused to fade. She recalled him mentioning a lakeside cabin that Isabel had inherited, a secluded spot about 2 hours away. Trevor insisted he had searched there right after her mother vanished, found nothing, and locked it up. But had anyone else confirmed that? Waiting for Trevor to doze off in his recliner that evening, Scarlett tiptoed to his study. Inside, she found reams of documents in a locked cabinet. Her heart pounded as she tried to pick the lock using hairpins, a trick she'd seen once on TV. After several tense minutes, a soft click signaled success. Her hands shook as she flipped through the folders. Among bills and insurance forms was a stack labeled cabin. Her mother's name was nowhere in sight. Instead, a copy of a newly filed property deed, listing Trevor as a co-owner. Scarlett pressed her lips together. How had he managed that? Before she could read further, she heard footsteps in the hallway. Hastily, she snapped photos of the documents with her phone and relocked the cabinet. She darted out, heart hammering, just as Trevor rounded the corner. Scarlett? His voice cut through the dark hallway. What are you doing up so late? She forced a calm smile. Couldn't sleep. I'm, grabbing water. He studied her for a tense moment, then nodded. Try to rest. You have school tomorrow. Her mind buzzed. No wonder Trevor didn't want a deeper police search. If he had manipulated ownership of the cabin, could he have done something far worse? The following day, Scarlett confided in Miss Farrow about the suspicious cabin deeds. She carefully avoided revealing how she got them, only that she'd stumbled across them among Trevor's files. Miss Farrow frowned, alarm clear in her eyes, but as Scarlett expected, Miss Farrow hesitated. The police had officially suspended the search, and approaching them with stolen documents might cause more complications. So what do we do? Scarlett whispered, tears threatening. I can't just wait around. Ms. Farrow leaned forward. We might approach your stepfather directly, but that could make him defensive or suspicious. Another option is that I could call Detective Walsh, show him what you found. Scarlett nodded. Do you think he'll actually do anything with it? Miss Farrow took a steady breath. He might. And if not, we'll keep going until someone listens. Yet, as days passed, Miss Farrow's attempts to contact the detective yielded no immediate action. He seemed reluctant to investigate leads that might cross into questionable territory. We have no real proof of wrongdoing, he said in a half-hearted phone call Miss Farrow played for Scarlett. The property documents alone don't prove your stepfather is involved in Ms. Lewis's disappearance. Scarlett felt her frustration spike. But she would gather the proof herself. If Trevor had taken her mother to that cabin, the only way to verify it was to see it with her own eyes. Late one night, after Trevor retired to bed, Scarlett snuck downstairs. She tossed a few essentials, warm clothes, her phone charger, some snacks, into her backpack. Her plan was impulsive. She'd take the first bus at dawn to the nearest town by the lake, then hike to the cabin if no cab was available. It was reckless, but she couldn't bear waiting anymore. She left a note for Miss Farrow, letting her know she was determined to check the cabin. If Miss Farrow read it in time, she might intervene or at least meet her there. But Scarlett expected to handle this alone. Scarlett's heart hammered the entire bus ride, a sense of dread gnawing at her. What if she was wrong? Worse, what if she was right? As the bus wound through narrow roads, tall evergreens crept by. By mid-morning, she reached the small lakeside town. The crisp air smelled of pine and damp earth. She used the last bit of her pocket money to pay a local driver to drop her near a secluded path leading to the cabin. When he pulled away, leaving her alone on a gravel road, Scarlett felt fear swirl in her stomach. Yet she marched on. The old trail twisted around the lake. Eventually, she found a muddy driveway leading to a solitary structure, the cabin. It looked neglected, with boarded windows and an overgrown lawn. Her breath caught in her throat. She couldn't see any vehicle. The place seemed deserted. Scarlett crept to the front door, stepping around fallen branches. But she tried peering through a gap in the boards, but it was too dark inside. Heart pounding, she circled the cabin. Around back, a small window was cracked. She slipped her hand through carefully, managing to unlatch it. One leg at a time, she climbed inside. Dust motes danced in the gloomy space. She stared at warped floorboards, an old table, and debris scattered everywhere. "Mom," she called softly, her voice echoing unnaturally. Her eyes adjusted, and she made out a locked interior door that seemed out of place, as though newly reinforced. Her heart thundered. Crossing the cabin, she tested the handle, no luck. She gave it a shove. The wood refused to budge. Suddenly, a faint noise startled her from the other side of that door. It sounded like a moan or a muffled voice. Scarlett whispered, "Mom?" She pressed her ear against the wood. There it was again, a faint whimper. Her pulse soared with a mixture of terror and hope. She had to get inside. Spotting a rusted crowbar leaning in a corner, she grabbed it. Summoning every bit of adrenaline, she wedged it against the frame, prying until the door's hinges groaned. Eventually, the wood splintered, giving way enough for her to slip through. Inside lay a cramped storage area. The stench of stale air overwhelmed her. And there, huddled on the floor, was her mother, eyes half-lidded with fatigue, wrists bound. Isabel Lewis. Alive. "Mom!" Scarlett cried, dropping beside her. She fumbled with the rope, tears spilling down her face. Isabel stirred, confusion clouding her gaze before recognition flooded in. "Scarlett?" Her voice, a raspy whisper, cracked. "Sweetheart, what are you, how?" Scarlett's hands shook as she finally untied the rope. I knew you were alive. I never stopped believing." She helped Isabel sit upright, pulling her mother into a fierce hug. Isabel trembled, leaning on Scarlett as though she had no strength left. "Trevor," Isabel managed between shallow breaths. He brought me here. Threatened me. Said no one would believe anything I said. I couldn't contact you." Her eyes welled with tears, desperation and relief mingling. "He took my phone, locked me up." Scarlett, "Oh God, I'm so sorry." A million questions tangled on Scarlett's tongue. Why did he do this? How did it happen? But at that moment, she only pressed her forehead against Isabel's, tears hot on her cheeks. "It's okay, Mom. We're getting out of here." They stumbled out into the cabin's main area. Isabel leaned on Scarlett for support. She was dehydrated and disoriented, but her relief was palpable. "I never lost hope," Isabel murmured, voice quivering, "but I was so scared. If you hadn't come?" The words hung, unspoken. Scarlett's determination flared. "We have to go, now," she insisted. "Trevor might come back." Sure enough, as they stepped outside, the unmistakable sound of an engine rumbled up the driveway. Her stomach lurched, fear gripping her. A black SUV, a vehicle she recognized all too well, lurched to a stop. Trevor hopped out, scanning the cabin with a thunderous expression. "Scarlett!" he shouted, spotting her half-supporting Isabel. "What do you think you're doing?" His voice snapped like a whip, any pretense of kindness gone. Scarlett glared, adrenaline spiking. "I know what you did," she yelled back. "You locked her in there. I found her. Why would you do this?" He advanced, anger contorting his features. "I told her to keep quiet," he growled. "She was going to expose me, ruin everything. You had to go snooping, didn't you?" Isabel shrank behind Scarlett, trying to stand tall despite her weakness. "Trevor, you can't keep us here. The police will find out." He barked a laugh. "The police? They shut down the search. No one believed you were still out there." His gaze flicked to Scarlett, voice dripping with contempt. "You just had to meddle. This didn't concern you." Scarlett's knees threatened to buckle, but she held firm. "I won't let you hurt her anymore." Trevor's jaw twitched, eyes darting around as though weighing his options. Isabel took an unsteady step forward. "It's over, Trevor. Let us leave, or we'll tell everyone what you've done." Rage flashed across his face. For a frightening second, Scarlett thought he'd lunge at them. But distant sounds of another engine drifted into the clearing. Trevor's head jerked up, alarm flaring in his eyes. A second car appeared behind Trevor's SUV. Out stepped Miss Farrow and, to Scarlett's shock, Detective Walsh. Ms. Farrow locked eyes with Scarlett, relief flooding her expression. "Scarlett, thank goodness we found you." She moved toward them, and Detective Walsh hurried behind her, scanning the tense scene. Trevor froze, fists clenched. The detective's posture screamed readiness. "Mr. Lewis, stay where you are," Walsh commanded. "We've received information linking you to Isabel's disappearance. Put your hands up." For a moment, Trevor appeared on the verge of bolting, but the detective approached with calm authority. Miss Farrow rushed over, helping Isabel remain upright. "We got your note, and when you didn't show at school, we tracked you here," Miss Farrow explained breathlessly to Scarlett, tears brimming in her eyes. "Oh my goodness, Isabel, are you all right?" Isabel mustered a shaky nod, hugging Scarlett. "She saved me." The following hours blurred. The detective radioed for backup, and paramedics arrived, quickly assessing Isabel's condition. Trevor, subdued, was read his rights and placed in the back of a squad car, looking stunned and furious. Scarlett and Isabel clung to each other, hearts still pounding. At the local hospital, Scarlett waited anxiously in the corridor while doctors examined her mother. Miss Farrow sat beside her, rubbing her back reassuringly. Scarlett stared at the dull linoleum, exhaustion finally catching up. Eventually, Detective Walsh emerged from a side room, wearing an uncharacteristically gentle expression. "Your mom's stable," he said quietly. "Dehydrated and stressed, but she'll recover." Scarlett let out a ragged breath, tears slipping down her cheeks. Miss Farrow squeezed her shoulder. Walsh continued, "Trevor confessed that he coerced your mother into signing certain property documents. Once he realized she might reveal his fraud, he panicked." Scarlett's head spun, relief and indignation warring inside. But all that truly mattered was that her mother was alive. With Trevor's arrest came a flood of revelations. He'd planned to profit from Isabel's assets, forging her signature where needed. When Isabel caught him, he resorted to forcibly isolating her, keeping her hidden until he could figure out how to manipulate the situation further. He never expected Scarlett, a determined 13-year-old, to unravel his carefully woven lies. A few days later, after Isabel was released from the hospital with instructions to rest, she and Scarlett sat at the kitchen table, together at last. Though both looked worn, relief blanketed the small home. "You were so brave," Isabel said, voice still tinged with disbelief. She reached across the table, taking Scarlett's hand. "If you hadn't followed your instincts, I don't know what would have happened to me." Scarlett's gaze fell to the wood grain. I couldn't let you stay missing. I knew the police wanted to give up, but her voice wavered. Isabel squeezed her fingers. "You believed in me when nobody else did." Scarlett's cheeks warmed, tears threatening again. "I was scared every single day, but something about Trevor was so off." Her mother sighed, closing her eyes briefly. "He seemed so kind at first, didn't he? But I guess I didn't see the danger until it was too late." A thin tremor ran through her. "I'm so sorry I put you through this." Scarlett shook her head vehemently. "None of this is your fault. He tricked everyone." Isabel blinked back tears, pulling her daughter into a fierce hug. "We'll get through this together." 4 weeks, Detective Walsh and the district attorney's office built their case against Trevor, who now faced kidnapping, fraud, and various other charges. While Isabel focused on healing, both physically and emotionally, Scarlett settled back into a routine at school. Miss Farrow remained a trusted confidant, never prying but always ready to support. Word spread quickly about Scarlett's role in solving her mother's disappearance. Students whispered in the halls, some in awe of her courage, others spinning rumors about the details. Scarlett tried to tune them out. She had already lived the terrifying reality. Eventually, Isabel was strong enough to attend a court proceeding where Trevor was formally indicted. Scarlett accompanied her, heart pounding at the memory of that confrontation at the cabin. But seeing Trevor in a prison jumpsuit, his arrogance deflated, gave her a strange sense of closure. The man who nearly tore them apart would never threaten them again. Despite the relief, the road ahead wasn't entirely smooth. Isabel had nightmares, waking in cold sweats, remembering locked doors and darkness. Scarlett, too, felt jumpy whenever a shadow passed near her bedroom window. But they leaned on each other, forging an even stronger bond than before. Gradually, they began laughing at old jokes, cooking meals together, replanting her mother's beloved flowers in the backyard. On the first warm weekend after Isabel's return, mother and daughter ventured to the park for a simple picnic. Isabel breathed in the fresh air deeply, face tilting to the sun's gentle warmth. "I missed this," she murmured. "Just being outside, feeling free." Scarlett grinned, passing her a sandwich. "We'll have to make up for lost time. I want to drag you hiking, or maybe a real camping trip if you're up for it." Isabel's smile reached her eyes. "I'm up for anything as long as we're together." They sat side by side on a checkered blanket, letting the breeze ruffle their hair. Not everything was perfect. Trevor's trial loomed, and testimonies would undoubtedly dredge up painful memories. But right here, in the warmth of midday, they savored a sense of peace. In the weeks that followed, Miss Farrow's classroom remained Scarlett's sanctuary. When the final bell rang one afternoon, Scarlett lingered behind, helping Miss Farrow stack graded papers. The teacher paused, glancing at her. "How are you feeling these days, Scarlett?" "Better," she replied, setting down a neat pile of tests. "Mom's safe. I still have nightmares sometimes, but I'm doing better." Miss Farrow gave a small, proud smile. "I'm glad. You've been so strong through all of this. The entire staff is proud of you for not giving up. Your mother, too, of course." Scarlett swallowed thickly, recalling the cold cabin, that locked door. "Thank you for not giving up on me, Miss Farrow." They shared a moment of quiet understanding. Then Miss Farrow added lightly, "By the way, the school wants to recognize you in some capacity. A local journalist asked to write a piece about you finding your mother." Scarlett's eyes widened. "Emmy? I don't know if I want that kind of attention." Miss Farrow laughed softly. "That's what I told them. But if you change your mind, let me know. It could spread awareness about missing person cases and how kids can speak up." Scarlett tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, pondering. Maybe someday. As the summer break inched closer, Isabel and Scarlett made plans to spend a weekend at a different, family-owned cottage by the sea, somewhere that didn't hold terrifying memories. They packed swimsuits and books, determined to begin a new chapter. The day before their mini-vacation, Scarlett rummaged in her closet and found the locked journal of her mother's. She hurried downstairs, excited. "Mom, we never actually opened this. I bet we can find the key now." Isabel took the journal, turning it over in her hands. A bittersweet smile tugged at her lips. "I must have hidden the key somewhere. You know me, always leaving clues." Scarlett smirked, remembering all the scavenger hunts her mother used to create. "We'll find it and maybe we can read it together?" Her mother beamed. "Yes, I'd like that. No more secrets between us." On a warm Friday afternoon, with the trunk packed and the sea breeze calling, mother and daughter buckled into their car. As they pulled away from the old house, Scarlett caught sight of the battered, missing posters still taped to a telephone pole. She swallowed a pang of sorrow for all the people who might never get closure. But then she thought of Miss Farrow, Detective Walsh, who, despite initial reluctance, ultimately helped, and her own unwavering determination. Isabel glanced at her, hand finding hers. "Ready?" Scarlett nodded. "Ready." The engine purred, and they cruised off, leaving behind the darkness of the past month. The horizon stretched wide open, a promise of better days. They couldn't erase what happened, but they could write the next chapter on their own terms, together, safe, and free. A few days later, Miss Farrow received a short text from Scarlett. "We're okay. Thank you for everything." Accompanying the text was a photo, Scarlett and Isabel smiling at a sunny beach, sand caked between their toes. Miss Farrow grinned, tapping her phone. If any story embodied persistence and love triumphing over dread, it was theirs. She typed back, "Take care. And if you're ever ready to share your story with the world, let me know." Then she set the phone down, looking out her window at the evening sky. A tiny swirl of pride warmed her chest, thinking of the quiet student who refused to let her mother vanish without a fight. For Miss Farrow, and anyone else who had glimpsed the miracle of a determined child searching for a lost loved one, this entire ordeal was more than a rescue. It was a testament to the raw power of faith, courage, and the unwavering bond between a mother and her daughter. Thank you for reading until the end. If you found this story meaningful, please consider liking and subscribing for more.